The wind had shifted across the Redstone Plains, carrying the scent of an approaching storm as John Parker drove his old pickup along the dirt road, cutting through his 200-acre Texas ranch. The late April sky darkening over the horizon, the lake shimmering faintly in the distance, its calm a stark contrast to the tension knotting his gut. At 54, John had lived most of her life on this land. Fences, cattle, stubborn horses, dry summers. That was his rhythm, not a cowboy in the romantic sense, just a rancher who did the work, quiet, dependable, unnoticed, the burn scar on his forearm throbbing with a dull ache as he gripped the wheel, the wildflowers along the road trembling in the breeze. Their vibrant colors a quiet promise of peace he'd fought to maintain, the faint lowing of cattle and the rustle of leaves carrying a warning on the wind, a sign of something stirring in the wild. After repelling the cartel with his Delta Force team, John had hoped for a season to mend the ranch's wounds and Ethan's resolve, but now the air thrummed with a different kind of energy, not danger, but something ancient, untamed, and he'd face it with the steel of his years, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, the wildflowers enduring despite the storms that had come before. He'd been returning from delivering feed to Clara Hensley's place when his headlights caught a flash of movement where there shouldn't have been any, a glint of struggle in the fading light. Pulling over fast near an old barbed wire fence, its posts leaning, barely standing, entangled in it, thrashing, bleeding a wild Mustang. Not a ranch escapee, not a tame horse gone feral, but a true Mustang, his coat a stormy gray, almost blue, with streaks of white across the flanks, one front leg deeply twisted in the wire, blood soaking into the dry dirt. His black mane stuck to his neck with sweat and dust, bucking once hard, then locking eyes with John, not just fear in those eyes, but pain, pride, defiance, the lake glowing silver in the distance. Its calm a distant promise amidst the storm to come. John didn't move, knowing better than to rush a panicked wild horse, instead squatting slowly, keeping his eyes low, palms open. "Easy, boy," muttering, no sudden movements, no rope, no tools, just presence. After a minute that felt like an hour, John moving forward, the Mustang twitching, nostrils flaring but not thrashing again. Losing blood, strength, fight. Worse than fear. John keeping his voice calm, inching closer until he could reach the wire, seeing it had sliced deep into the pastern. The kind of wound that took weeks to heal, if ever. The wildflowers along the fence trembling in the breeze, the plains pulsing with the weight of history, their roots deep in the Texas soil. Pulling off his glove, John reached into his coat pocket for wire cutters, always on him for fence repairs. Now, they might save a life, the Mustang's ears flicking as John moved in. Seeing the blade, feeling the pressure, the cut precise, clean, the wire snapping, the horse flinching but not kicking, 2 more cuts, the leg coming free, the Mustang collapsing to one side. Chest heaving, mouth foaming, John backing up slowly, giving him space, and just when he thought the horse might never rise, the Mustang rolling to his side, pushing once, twice, standing, 3-legged, shaky but standing, the lake shimmering faintly beyond the ridge, its surface a mirror of the hope that endured. That's when John heard it, a low, heavy sound behind him, hooves, turning slowly to see 4 more Mustangs at the crest of the hill, all wild, all watching, coats of every shade, red roan dun, buckskin black, their ears forward, muscles tense. Having seen everything, John standing frozen, unsure what they'd do, the gray Mustang, still limping, letting out a deep, sharp snort, the others responding in kind, descending the hill. John not knowing if they were angry, grateful, or something else entirely, only knowing they were coming straight for him, the wildflowers along the hill trembling in the evening light, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, their roots deep in the Texas soil. John had faced bulls before, even a mountain lion during a cold winter patrol on the ridge, but this was different. No threat in the Mustang's approach, but no mercy in their eyes either. Ancient, instinctual, impossible to ignore the wild power on 4 hooves surrounding him. The gray Mustang, now free, stumbling once, but holding himself tall, the bleeding leg quivering but standing his ground, ears rotating, not trying to run, waiting, the first to reach John a red roan mare, smaller but sharp-eyed. Nostrils flaring as she circled him once, fast, then the black stallion, tall, proud, coat shining like polished obsidian under the dying light, walking in slow, heavy steps, eyes never leaving John. Next a golden buckskin, broader in the chest, thick tangled mane, a single scar across his left flank, and finally a young dun, barely more than a colt, curious, unsure, lingering behind the others. Not charging, not scattering, forming a circle around John, around the gray, around the blood-soaked dirt, the lake glowing gold outside as the last rays of dusk faded. The wildflowers enduring despite the storm, their roots deep in the Texas soil. Every muscle in John's body screamed to move, back away, show respect, prove he wasn't a threat. But something deep in his gut said, "Don't run, don't flinch, let them see you," turning slowly, one breath at a time, making eye contact with each horse, the black stallion snorting, hooves stamping once, twice, kicking up dust, the red roan flicking her ears, the buckskin lowering his head, then lifting it quickly, as if nodding, then the gray Mustang limping forward. Every horse stepping back slightly, giving him space, coming to stand in front of John, close enough to feel his breath, hear the rasp of pain in every exhale, John whispering, "You're free now, you understand that?" The Mustang blinking slowly, then, without warning, leaning forward, touching his muzzle gently to John's chest. A press, a pause, a retreat, the circle breaking. The black stallion giving a loud, harsh snort, turning, the others following, first the buckskin, then the dun, finally the red roan, pausing a moment longer before trotting after them. The wildflowers along the path trembling in the breeze, the plains pulsing with the weight of history, their roots deep in the Texas soil. The gray stayed, John stepping back, giving him space. The Mustang breathing hard, the wound on his legs still oozing, but his stance steady. "You need help," John muttering, "but I don't think you'll let me touch you again." A gust of wind blowing across the field, behind it the sound of distant thunder, the herd reaching the ridge, silhouetted against the fading pink sky, but the gray not following, looking at John. Then back to the others, neighing loud, sharp, raw, the herd stopping, turning, waiting, John holding his breath. "Go on," saying under his breath. "Go with them. That's where you belong." But the gray staying, then something happening John would never forget. The black stallion, the leader, stepping forward, bowing just once, not to the gray, to John, then turning, the herd moving on. The gray Mustang limping away, one last glance over his shoulder before disappearing into the wild. John standing alone again, heart racing, hands shaking. For the first time in his life, not feeling like the one watching, but seen, the lake glowing silver in the distance, its calm a testament to the peace he'd found. The wildflowers enduring despite the storm, their roots deep in the Texas soil. The storm hit just before midnight, wind howling against the windows of John's cabin, the tin roof rattling under hard rain and distant thunder. Sitting alone at the kitchen table, boots still on, a half-eaten sandwich pushed aside, not hungry, not after what he'd lived hours before. Unable to shake the image, the wounded Mustang pressing its muzzle to his chest, the herd watching, the black stallion bowing, like it meant something. John having lived around wild horses all his life, but that's something you didn't just move on from. By morning, the storm passing, his fence blown over in 2 places, the water trough near the east field overturned, throwing on his raincoat, stepping out with a grumble, halfway through cleaning the debris when seeing something strange in the mud. Tracks. Hoof prints, fresh. Not his own horses, still in a barn. These larger, deeper, wild as breath catching, no way, following the tracks up the hill across the eastern ridge, where the brush had been flattened, water still running between the stones, then stopping, right in the center of a clearing, a pile of bones, old, picked clean, arranged like a shrine. Not a predator kill, no blood, No mess, just organized, and in the center, laid out neatly, his wire cutter, the one he'd used to free the gray Mustang, not even realizing it was missing. The wildflowers along the clearing trembling in the morning light, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, their roots deep in the Texas soil. His heart thudding, John kneeling slowly, staring at it. Not rusted, carried here, placed like an offering, a message, turning slowly, the ridge behind him still, the wind soft, a few birds chirping in the distance. Then from the tree lean, a shape emerging, the gray Mustang, limping forward one step at a time, head high, eyes locked on John, his leg healing better than expected. Behind him 3 more horses, not the whole herd, but familiar faces, the red roan mare, the young dun, and a new one, a foal, barely a few months old, clinging to the mare's side, John not moving, the gray stopping a few feet from him. Snorting softly, John raising a hand. "Did you do this?" Asking quietly, nodding to the wire cutter, the Mustang blinking, then, incredibly, taking another step, nudging the tool toward John. Deliberately, no mistake, no coincidence, John picking it up slowly, fingers wrapping around the worn rubber grip, the Mustang not backing away, standing taller, proud, present. Looking down again at the bone pile, some clearly horse bones, a shoulder blade, a skull, a spine. Had they brought him here to remember something, to honor the fallen? He didn't know. But in that moment, feeling welcomed into something, not tamed, not claimed, but trusted, the lake glowing gold outside as the first rays of dawn broke, the wildflowers enduring despite the storm, their roots deep in the Texas soil. The gray Mustang turning then, flicking his tail once, the others following quietly, disappearing into the trees, the gray pausing, looking back. John giving him a slow nod. "You're not just wild," saying, "You're watching, learning, smiling, a little shaken. And now you've got me doing the same, back at the cabin, cleaning the wire cutter, hanging it above the fireplace, not needing to explain it to anyone, because that day, for the first time in years, John not feeling like he was living on the edge of the wild, but part of it. Waking the next morning with a strange energy pulsing in his chest, not sleeping much, but not maturing, something in him shifting, for most of his life working beside animals, horses, dogs, cattle, but always on his terms, giving orders, them following, but what happened on the ridge flipping the order of things, the Mustang showing him something, a message, a memory, maybe a ritual. And now he couldn't shake the feeling they weren't done. The wildflowers along the cabin's edge trembling in the breeze, the plains pulsing with the weight of history, their roots deep in the Texas soil. The gray Mustang not returning since the offering, but the next day, John finding fresh hoof prints near his property again, leading down the North Trail, twisting deep into the forested hills, a trail few humans used, something about the pattern telling him this wasn't random wandering, but a path, an invitation, not hesitating, packing water, wearing his old trail boots, slinging a rope and radio over his shoulder, more out of habit than necessity, following the prints into the trees, the trail growing tighter, trees closer. Early spring. The forest floor soft with new growth, birds scattering overhead, the air smelling of moss and cedar. John moving carefully, scanning the tracks. 5 sets of hooves, one smaller, the foal. 2 familiar, the gray and the red roan. The others heavier, deeper, likely the black stallion and the buckskin, the whole herd having come this way, but why walking over an hour? Deeper than he'd ever ventured, the sound of running water rising, soon finding himself at the edge of a rocky stream cutting through a narrow canyon, and there, across the stream, on a natural shelf of flat stone, the entire herd, 7 horses, the gray in front, standing tall, leg heeled enough to bear full weight, the black stallion to the side, watching like a sentinel. No fear, no movement to flee. The lake shimmering faintly beyond a ridge, its surface a mirror of the hope that endured. John freezing, ankle deep in the stream, staring, they had waited for him, crossing slowly, letting the water soak into his boots, his breath catching as he reached the stone shelf, the gray Mustang stepping forward, the herd parting behind him. revealing something hidden in the brush. John squinting, stepping closer, his heart stopping. A makeshift grave, a shallow depression in the earth, carefully covered with moss, flowers. Bones arranged in a circular pattern, and in the center, wrapped in old leather and tangled rope, a halter, not wild, a domestic halter, faded initials burned into the strap. JC. John kneeling slowly, hands trembling. This was someone's horse, whispering, looking up at the gray. You brought me here to show me this. The gray not moving, but his eyes, deep dark, endless, holding a weight John couldn't describe. This not just about the Mustang he saved, but all of them, the ones lost, discarded, forgotten, now remembered. The wildflowers along the canyon trembling in the breeze. The plains stretching wide and unbroken, their roots deep in the Texas soil. Sitting there in silence, knees in the grass, hands resting on the halter. I get it now, saying softly, looking around at the herd, their patience, their stillness. You're not just survivors, standing slowly, holding the halter like a sacred object. You're storytellers. That evening, returning home with the halter wrapped in his coat, placing it gently beside the wire cutter above the fireplace. Two pieces of evidence, two messages from a world that speaks without words. For the first time in his life, feeling chosen to carry those stories forward for the next 3 days, not telling a soul. Feeding his horses, fixing the fence, drinking his morning coffee like nothing had changed, but inside, everything had. Every glance at the fireplace where the halter and wire cutter rested, feeling the same pressure in his chest. Not guilt, purpose. The Mustang's not just showing him something, but entrusting him with it. The lake glowing silver in the distance. It's come a testament to the peace he'd found, the wildflowers enduring despite the storm, their roots deep in the Texas soil. On the fourth morning, grabbing his old camera from the closet, dusty, forgotten, not used since Ethan's first birthday years ago, not wanting to post a selfie or make a viral video, but to document it right. The place, the bones, the halter, the path. The herd, returning to the canyon trail alone, retracing the steps, the track still faint in the mud, the gravesite remaining untouched, sacred, taking slow, steady photos, not just wide shots, but close-ups of the carved initials, the leather knots, the smooth stones around the grave, then doing something he never thought he would, sitting in the middle of the site, beginning to speak. No script, just letting the words come. This was more than a horse. This was someone's story, and the wild kept it alive when no one else did. Back at the cabin, transferring the files. Writing a short post. No hashtags, no flashy headline, just truth. I met a Mustang. He led me here. I don't know what this place is exactly, but it matters, and I think it deserves to be remembered. Logging off, not expecting anything, not checking the comments the next day. But by the third day, the post shared over 200,000 times, a woman from Austin messaging. I lost a Mustang named Jasper. Branded JC. I thought he was stolen. A retired vet from Dallas replying, that halter model was mine. I used to rehab BLM rescues with those initials burned in. The wildflowers along the cabin's edge trembling in the breeze. The plains pulsing with the weight of history, their roots deep in the Texas soil. Messages pouring in from other ranchers' stories. Rumors, whispers about Mustangs showing up near old graves, guiding people to forgotten corners of land where something had happened. John reading each in silence, a picture forming. This not an isolated moment, but part of something larger. The wild remembering what humans forgot. A week later, a woman showing up at his front gate in a dusty blue truck, in her 50s, strong posture, sun-worn skin, introducing herself as Elena Martinez, field reporter, environmental writer, lifelong wild horse advocate. I don't want to sensationalize anything, saying, but I think the world needs to know this story, all of it. John hesitating, looking past her toward the tree lean, not having seen the gray Mustang in days, but feeling him, nodding, fine. But no circus, just truth. Hiking to the canyon the next morning, Elena barely speaking, only listening, kneeling by the grave, photographing the halter, the bones then standing, weeping. These horses, whispering, they're keeping watch. John not answering, not needing to. That night, her article going live. The Wild remembers a rancher, a Mustang, and a grave no one was supposed to find, hitting 1 million views in under 48 hours. Rescue centers reaching out, veterans groups sending donations, people from across the country writing. I believe it. I felt it too. I saw something like this once and thought I imagined it. The lake glowing gold outside as the last rays of dusk faded, the wildflowers enduring despite the storm, their roots deep in the Texas soil. 3 days after the article went live, John stepping onto his porch before sunrise, a mug of black coffee in hand, a heart full of questions. The silence feeling different, not the usual rural stillness, but something charged, like the world holding its breath, standing at the edge of the porch, scanning the ridgelines beyond the pasture. No movement, no sound. Then as the first rays of light hit the treetops, seeing him, the gray Mustang, standing tall, proud, leg fully healed, his coat shimmering silver in the golden morning light. Mane lifted by the breeze, and behind him, 6 more, the black stallion, the red roan, the buckskin, the dun, and 2 new horses John had never seen, a deep chocolate mare and a young foal. Maybe 3 months old with a white blaze and blue eyes, standing on a ridge in a tight group, unmoving, watching, waiting, John setting the coffee down, walking forward slowly, heart pounding with something he couldn't name. Respect, gratitude, fear. No, reverence, the herd descending the slope. Not galloping, not spooked, marching, each step chosen deliberate, the gray leading them straight to John's fence line, not hesitating, opening the gate, the herd not crossing, but the gray stepping through, one step, then another, until standing a few feet in front of John, locking eyes, John whispering, "You came back," the Mustang exhaling, soft but sure, the others standing like silent witnesses. The wildflowers along the fence trembling in the morning light, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, their roots deep in the Texas soil. John glancing at the foal, so young, so alert, watching him like he mattered. Then, without a cue, the gray turning, walking toward the barn, John following, opening the side gate, letting the gray step into the corral, the Mustang circling once, stopping, looking back at the others, neighing short, sharp, the others responding in kind, slowly, 2 more Mustangs stepping forward, the young foal and the chocolate mare, crossing the open space. Entering the corral, John's breath catching. "What are you doing?" Whispering, but in his gut already knowing, these horses not just visiting, trusting him again, not for rescue, not for survival, but for legacy, backing away, giving them space, closing the gate, the gray standing near the center of the corral, raising his head proudly, as if presenting the foal to John, then stepping back, leaving just like that, the herd turning, walking toward the trees without panic, without hesitation, John watching them go, except for the mare and foal, remaining behind, calm, still. Not until an hour later realizing what had happened, kneeling near the foal, staring up at him without blinking. "You left him with me," whispering, "You trust me that much?" Hands trembling. For the first time in years, tears falling. The lake glowing silver in the distance, its calm a testament to the peace he'd found. The wildflowers enduring despite the storm, their roots deep in the Texas soil. That night, John not sleeping, sitting on the barn floor beside the foal and mare, watching the stars turn overhead, the gray Mustang gone again. Back into the wild, but something in John telling him it wouldn't be forever, this no longer about a rescue, but a partnership, a passing of stories, and somewhere out there, the wild still watching, giving him something more permanent, a life, a responsibility, a bond, naming the full Echo, because the wild speaks softly, but once it trusts you, it never stops speaking. Spring passing slowly into summer. Every day with Echo and his mother feeling like chapters in a book he was meant to read, Echo growing stronger with each sunrise, legs steadier, gaze more curious. Following John around the corral like a shadow, watching every motion, mimicking his steps, not in a trained way, in a connected way, not learning commands, but learning the man, the mare, whom John named Sienna, remaining wary but calm, allowing John close, especially when Echo was nearby, younger than John first thought, maybe 8 or 9, intelligent eyes, slow breath, a survivor. It not taking long before she began to trust him too. No ropes, no force, only quiet understanding. The wildflowers along the corral trembling in the breeze. The plains pulsing with the weight of history, their roots deep in the Texas soil. Over time, something incredible happening. Echo calling out at sunset, a high, wild neigh into the wind. Though no horse ever coming back, John always feeling like someone was listening, the world not forgetting them. More letters arriving, some from people who'd seen mustangs in dreams, others from those who'd released their horses into the wild, hoping they'd find freedom instead of slaughter. One woman sending a photo of a colt she'd released 5 years ago, a gray coat, a black mane, a jagged mark on the pastern, matching John's Mustang exactly. His name was Storm. Writing, "He escaped before I could save him. I always wondered if he made it." John printing the message, placing it beside the halter on the fireplace mantel. One golden afternoon, Echo standing at the edge of the paddock, ears forward, fixated on the ridge. John stepping outside. "You see something?" The foal letting out a soft noise, not fear but recognition. Sienna standing behind him, alert, and that's when John saw it. A dark shape of the tree lean. The gray Storm, not coming closer, just standing, watching, John taking off his hat, holding it against his chest. I kept him safe, whispering, "You did good." The Mustang turning, vanishing back into the trees. The lake glowing gold outside as the last rays of dusk faded, the wildflowers enduring despite the storm, their roots deep in the Texas soil. That night, John unable to sleep, walking down to the corral under the stars, finding Echo standing near the fence, calm, sitting on the grass, whispering, "You know who he is, don't you?" Echo looking at him, stepping forward, resting his small head against John's chest, the exact same way Storm had done the day John cut the wire. No coincidence, this is son, his story continuing. 2 weeks later, John holding a gathering on the property. Not a festival, not a media stunt, a quiet invitation. Horse rescuers, Mustang advocates, a few locals, some veterans, children, gathering in the open field as the sun dipped behind the hills. John standing near the old post where Storm had stood that first day, clearing his throat, saying simply, "I didn't tame a Mustang. I listened to one, and now he's trusted me with something bigger than myself." Turning to the crowd, pointing toward Echo. "That foal was born wild, but he chose to stay, and I believe he's here to remind us of what we've forgotten, that the wild doesn't need saving, it needs respecting." The crowd silent, then a single clap, another, then applause like thunder. The wildflowers along the field trembling in the evening light, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, their roots deep in the Texas soil. After the gathering, a girl approaching John, maybe 12, freckles, a notebook in hand, looking up, asking, "Can I draw him?" John smiling, Echo, she nodding, "He doesn't pose much," chuckling, "I don't need him to sing. I already saw the whole story." John blinking, "What do you mean?" The girl opening her notebook, inside a sketch of a Mustang bowing to a man. Another of a foal standing beneath a tree with bones at its base. A final image. Echo staring into John's eyes, the wind blowing through both, the caption beneath reading, "The wild gave him a voice." He gave it back, John hanging the sketch beside the fireplace. Every morning after, when Echo galloped across the field, free, joyful, John knowing one thing for certain. He hadn't rescued a horse. He'd been called by a Mustang who trusted the wild, passing that trust to a man who finally listened. The lake glowing silver in the distance, its calm a testament to the peace he'd found. The wildflowers enduring despite the storm, their roots deep in the Texas soil. The crew gathered in the yard, coffee steaming in mugs. The air thick with the scent of roasted beans and the faint tang of hay that clung to their clothes. Ethan slouched in a chair, his face steady, trust forged in the wild's fire. The map spread wide across the table, the northern pasture marked in green ink, a testament to the day's bond. the lantern light casting long shadows over their weary faces. The lake glowing gold outside as the last rays of dusk faded, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, wildflowers battered but enduring, their roots deep in the Texas soil. Frank said, leaning back, his pistol gleaming on his hip, his voice gravelly but sure. "You heard it. Grayson won't." Mary Ellen poured coffee, her hand firm, her voice edged with steel. "Echo's a sign. Your bond's a wall, John. We'll stand." Jake grinned, his fists unclenching, dust still smudged on his face. "They trusted you. Ethan, too. He's wild now." Sarah nodded from the corner, her phone glowing with Elena's last update, her voice resolute. "Story's out. World's listening. We'll keep it alive." Matt tapped his laptop, fingers pausing as he met John's gaze, his tone sharp. "Grayson's watching. He'll twist this. I'll dig. Won't stop till we know." Tom stood by the door, lantern dimming, his broad frame a silent pillar, his voice low but firm. "I'll watch the ridge. Plains are calm, but eyes ain't." John met Ethan's gaze across the table, the boy's eyes steady despite the weight of the day, his hands still steady from the bond. And John's voice cut through the room like steel tempered in fire. "You saw today, felt the wild like a Parker. That's good. Keep it up, Ethan. The story's just the start. We've got more coming." Ethan swallowed hard, nodding slow, his voice quiet but raw. "I will, Dad, swear it. No more doubting." The room fell silent, the lake glowing silver outside as the night deepened. The plains stretching wide and unbroken, wildflowers battered but enduring, their roots deep in the Texas soil. John rose, rifle close, stepping onto the porch where the air smelled of earth and renewal, his eyes scanning the ridge where the herd had stood, the memory of storms trust a warm weight on his heart. The legacy of his past a bond he'd carry until the end. Across the horizon, a light blinking, binoculars catching the starlight, then vanishing into the trees, a shadow still breathing in the darkness. A reminder that the fight was far from over, the wildflowers along the plains' edge blooming anew, their colors vibrant in the Texas night, the lake glowing silver in the distance. Its calm a testament to the peace John had won, but the storm on the horizon a promise of battles yet to come.